Hey guys, Dylan Goo here and welcome back to the Toon Shading tutorial. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Blender basics. So navigation, transformation, all that jazz. If you guys have already been using Blender for a while, go ahead and skip this video. You don't need it. But for those of you guys who have never used Blender before and want to jump into it and want to jump into this tutorial and make a cool character, this tutorial is for you. So stay tuned. We're going to be going over the basics of navigation here and as well as some transformation things and some editing things and all the things you need to know. Very simple, but you need to know them in order to use Blender to its fullest. So let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? This is the default scene in Blender. If you've ever opened Blender before, you have seen this scene. This is the camera, the cube, and the light. And just to go over that real quick, if you can't tell, this is my mouse. You can see what I've been pressing, but right click is select. We'll start out with that. Right click is select. Now you might think that's a little weird to use right click for select, like no other software does that, right? But I'm personally a big fan of it. I think it does a lot of wonders for clearing up any ambiguous clicks that happen in other softwares. Usually because left click is so ubiquitous, it becomes very ambiguous as to if they want to select something, or if they want to drag something, or if they want to select something else, etc., etc., etc. The right click and the left click separation there for the selection versus all the other things actually helps a lot. So I'm a big fan of it. If you guys can get used to it, I would recommend getting used to it. But there is an option to change your right click to your left click. If you go to, let me hit Control Shift U. If you go to input, you can select with left. And if you do that, it'll select with your left. But I recommend trying it with your right for a while first. If you can't get used to it, go ahead and switch it. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Let's move on. So another thing is, rotating in your scene like this. As you can see here, a free rotate around the cube, or revolve, I should say, with your camera. That is with the middle mouse button. So you just click and hold middle mouse button and drag. That will achieve that axis of movement. And then you can hold shift and then do middle mouse button. So shift and middle mouse button is to pan. So you can go left and right, up and down. And then if you want to zoom in, pretty obvious, you just scroll on your scroll wheel. That's it. Scroll in, scroll out. Scroll in, scroll out. Okay. So yeah, that, and that. So those are the three things you really need to know for basic navigation in Blender. Super simple. Hope that is helpful. Next is, of course, transformation. So we'll go over the G, S, and R hotkeys. GSR might sound kind of weird now, but now I can tell you that they stand for grab, scale, and rotate. And suddenly, hey, look at that. That's pretty easy to remember. So we have grab. We'll start out with grab. I'm going to go ahead and select this cube with right click. And then as you can see here, there's these arrows for the axes. We're going to ignore those for now because I prefer using the hotkeys, and I think you should learn how to use the hotkeys. And that is with G, you can freely grab. And this is such a nice feature because in no other software can you do this and then also let go of your hands and still just kind of move the mouse. I'm not holding or dragging any buttons or at all. It's just doing that. So it's very, it's much nicer on your fingers and your hands. Like for Maya and for other softwares, you have to click and drag to move things, and that's just very inefficient and very straining on your muscles, in my personal opinion. So if you hit G, you can do that. You can also do GX along the x-axis, or you can do let me right click. Okay, go ahead. Right click when you're in the middle of transformation. By the way, I didn't go over this. Right click is to cancel. So what's great about this is once you do this, you're like, okay, well, how do I actually move it? If you left click, that's confirmation. If you confirm your transformation, it will stay there. And if you right click, it will go back to where it was before you click G. So that's a very handy thing. It works for all three transformations: grab, scale, and rotate. Very important to know. Along with that, you have the GX, and then you also have GY, and you can switch these without having to press G again, but all you have to do is hit X, Y, or Z. Very, very intuitive. I mean, it's super easy to remember. And then you can move along any of these axes, and then also you can move along two axes and not the other one. So if you do Shift Z, you can move along the X and Y axes, and then Shift Y, you can move along those two, and then Shift X. Oh, yeah, Shift X. There we go. Yeah, so this is something fun to know. And then one last thing is Alt G. So Alt G basically returns the cube or any object back to its original position. And just to show you what the original position is, if you can see here, this transform property tab thing, I went ahead and pressed N for this, by the way. The letter N is the thing that opens up this properties tab here on the right of the viewport. It has the location here, so you can see the location of the cube changes when I drag it, right? And let's say I confirm it there. That's no longer 0, 0, 0. If you want to bring it back to 0, 0, 0, you hit Alt G. 0, 0, 0 can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the origin. It depends on where that local base transformation is. But for the most part, it's the origin. So another hotkey is R for rotate. So we'll go ahead and do that. R for rotate. As you can see, I can rotate along the axis that I'm looking at. But let's say you want to rotate along the x-axis. Boom, RX or RY or RZ. And of course, left click to confirm. And then Alt R to bring it back to 0, 0, 0 of the rotation attributes, values, whatever. And then we have something that is unique to rotation, which is after you hit R, you can hit R again. And then you get a free rotate, which is probably the most intuitive rotation tool here. It is very, very easy to rotate something from any angle with this tool. So you hit RR and you can rotate, kind of freely from any axis. I'm going to go ahead and left click and then Alt R. And then we'll move on to scale. So scale is obviously S. S is going to be for making things bigger or smaller, essentially. So as you can see here, the scale values here are also getting up. And for the XYZ, you can see you can also do X or Y or Z, right? Or you could do Shift Z. You could also do that for rotate, by the way. I didn't really go over that, but it's not as helpful with rotate because you can really only rotate along one axis anyway. And of course, Alt S also does the zeroing out of scale, except for scale, Alt S goes to 1 because going to 0 would be invisible. So anyway, let's see. That's about it for transformation. Now, I do have something I want to show you guys for before we get into the modeling part of the tutorial, and that's something called edit mode. Now, you might have noticed we can transform this cube all we want, but it's never going to turn into a snowman, right? This is it doesn't matter what I do to it, it's still not a snowman, right? So what you want to do is go into edit mode, and edit mode actually alters the vertices themselves. So if you hit the tab button, you notice everything turns orange. That's cool. But the reason why it's orange is because everything is selected. And when I say everything, I mean all of the vertices. So these vertices here are individual objects, essentially, individual entities that you can move, as you can see here. And that was from me right-clicking and dragging. That's another way to transform something, by the way. If you right-click and drag, you can go in that. And then if I can still let go of right-click, and it's still in the grab thing. And you left-click and right-click to confirm or deny, etc., etc. Anyway, just want to explain that there and why that happened. But yeah, you can select, and you can also shift select to select multiple points. And you can do this in object mode as well. Shift select works ubiquitously. But yeah, so once you do that, you can transform this cube however you want. You can even select multiple and kind of rotate it or scale it like that. You can do whatever you want. You could take these two and scale it. This is of course with the S and R and G keys only. So yeah, that's very, very intuitive. All the same transformation hotkeys are there, and except there's no reset position. I can't go here and hit Alt G. That doesn't do anything. So once you make a change, you have to undo it or just remember where it was. So yeah, cool. So I can undo things in here, in the edit mode. I can undo things here. Great. So it goes pretty far. I think we can get all the way down. No, that's as far as we can go. So that's just based on the undo buffer. It's not big enough, so that's as far as we can go. You can change that in the user preferences as well. Let's go ahead and see if we can do that real quick. Editing. Yeah, so undo, global undo, you can do steps. You can bring this up to like 256 or something like that. but that does use up more memory, so it's entirely up to you if you want to do that. Okay, anyway, so one thing I did want to talk about was undo history. So, which we just talked about, yes, but more specifically, undo history with edit mode. So you have an undo history with edit mode, and you can also hit Control-Shift-Z, by the way, for redo. It's not Control-Y like it is in a lot of softwares. It is, in my opinion, the superior hotkey, Control-Shift-Z, which just makes so much more sense. But yeah, so as you can see here, we have an undo history. I'm doing Control-Z, Control-Shift-Z, going back and forth, blah, 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 blah. Great. Now, I'm going to go all the way forward to our final transformation, do a little bit extra stuff here, and then I'm going to hit Tab. And I'm going to go back into object mode. And as you can see, I'm like, okay, well, I didn't like that. You know, maybe I want to bring it back to just one more step. Maybe I wanted to bring that one thing back in just a little bit like I had it before. I'm going to hit the Control-Z button, and everything's gone. Everything's gone because I'm in object mode. And in object mode, the undo history is separate. So in object mode, what they see as your edit mode and your edit mode doing all those crazy things, that edit mode history is separate. So you have basically a gap in the timeline of undo history where all you did was go into edit mode and then come back out of it. So when you undo once, it goes all the way back to the time before you went into edit mode, which is of course before you transformed anything. So now you have this cube that isn't transformed at all. And if you redo with Control-Shift-Z, it brings it back, but as you can see here, if we go into edit mode and try to bring back the undo history, it's all wiped out. So it will wipe out your undo history if you're not careful. So that's why I want to make sure you guys don't do that. I don't want you guys to lose any work. Yeah, anyway, the proper way to do it is like this. So let's say I'm just going to go and undo on purpose to this cube here so we can start over. I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab, go into edit mode, and I'm going to move some things around, blah, blah, blah. Look at this cube. Oh, man, I'm so cool. I'm moving a cube around. Cool. It's no longer a cube. Well, look at that. That's a very strange shape. But ultimately, if I hit Tab and I'm like, oh, cool, actually, I didn't really want to do that last thing I did in edit mode. You want to go back into edit mode and then Control-Z. You still have your full undo history that way. As you can see, I can go back and forth, and that's totally fine. Just make sure that you don't do anything crazy trying to undo things in object mode when really you want to be in edit mode. And yeah, that's it. Just wanted to warn you guys about that. Now, there are a few more tools that you guys need to learn, but we'll be going over those as we use them in the next tutorial where we begin the modeling process. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm sure excited, so let's jump into it. I'll see you guys there.